Okay, I would like to welcome everybody. I'm glad to see such a great turnout. And we will be starting the candidate forum of the meeting. There will be opening statements from each candidate that will be 2 minutes in length. We will be starting with Daniel Lee in the first position, and everybody will have a chance to speak. Then we'll have some questions that you can submit, and they will then take alternate turns in answering first. So then it will be position 2, Marcus, and then next question, Alex, and so on. Then before we end, there'll be kind of like a little abstract round robin type of get to know, which I'll give more instructions on later, and then closing statements that'll be 1.5 minutes. So for starting, we will have 2 minutes for each candidate.
And then how long for questions?
We'll get to, depending on the question.
So an opening statement from Daniel Lee, go ahead.
Good evening, Blair Hills. First, I'd like to say apologies for not being able to be here in person tonight. As John mentioned to a number of people, I'm in Nashville for my full-time job with the James Lawson Institute. We're also doing some training with Reverend William Barber from the Poor People's Campaign, which is why I've been out of town for a week, but I will be back this weekend knocking on doors. I've been a Culver City resident for the last 15 years. For the last 8 years, I've served on the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee. For the last 14 years, I've been a volunteer, mentor, or actor with the Young Storytellers program. For the last 6 years, I've been on the board of directors for Move to Amend, which focuses on amending the Constitution to say corporations are not people and money is not speech. I volunteered with the Culver City Community Coalition, the Sierra Club Clean Break Committee. I'm very committed to moving our city forward when it comes to both the environment and to a type of development that is inclusive, truly inclusive, that includes the opinions of residents. And I think this is very resonant for people in Blair Hills, but also people in East Culver, Fox Hills, and other areas where we've seen an uptick either in development or, as I heard, walking door to door, traffic. And I would love to serve our community as a whole, but part of my focus would be really honed in on making sure that some of the communities that have felt historically underrepresented actually are. Thank you.
Very directional, so you want to point it straight at it if you want to use it.
Do I need to use it, or?
I think you can fill this room probably,
Okay.
but it's up to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Tiggs. I've been a resident of Culver City for 26 or 27 years, just a long time. For the last 14 years, I've been extremely active in our community. I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years. In addition to that, I've been involved with the Fiesta La Bayona Committee for 14 years. The last 2 years, 2016 and 2017, as the chair. The beauty of the Fiesta La Bayona Committee is getting people together, different political views, different backgrounds, but focusing on a mission for an event that culminates our summer, for everyone to get together and have a nice time. And I enjoy being on that committee immensely. In addition to that, I was on the Centennial Celebration Committee. With that, I was the subcommittee chairperson for the time capsule. In that capacity, I was responsible with a team of other members of gathering items that are going to be included in our city's time capsule. In addition to that, I'm a member of the Culver City School Bond Oversight Committee. And as most of you know, we passed a bond, and in this committee, we make sure that the funds are used according to what the voters said, how they should be used. My job to make a living, I am a bankruptcy lawyer. I've been a bankruptcy lawyer for over 20 years, representing debtors, creditors, creditor committees, trustees, helping reorganize businesses, and keep people to have, allow them to have their jobs. My military background, I am a retired Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, and a combat veteran, and it's my pleasure to be here and hopefully for you to learn quite a bit more about me. Thank you.
Hello, Blair Hills. Thank you for having us tonight, and it's great to just start walking the neighborhood today, so getting to talk to people has been a real pleasure. I've visited fairly frequently, including your summer neighborhood event, which was great. But my name's Alex Fish. I am a homeowner here in Culver City. I've lived here for 13 years with my wife and now 2 kids who are in Culver City Unified Schools at El Marino, go Dolphins. And I was a corporate lawyer for the first 9 years that I lived in the city, because that's what it takes to buy a house in Culver City these days. Once I left private practice, I went to work for the California Attorney General's office, working in environmental enforcement. So from corporate bankruptcy to environmental enforcement, I have dealt with oil fields like what you have in some of your front yards professionally. Once I had more time in civic life, I began to get involved immediately with the city, and I joined the city's Committee on Homelessness, which I now chair. And with the city's Committee on Homelessness, it was very clear to me that the biggest social justice issue in Los Angeles County is homelessness. Since I made that decision, the number of people experiencing homelessness has exploded to where, at our last count a year ago, there were 58,000 people living without homes in Los Angeles County. So in that role, I was looking for something that we could do, a policy that we could really leverage our work and the city's power to deliver some results to people. And we created programs with the county, working with the county, and we are one of the leaders of the 88 cities in Los Angeles County in implementing programs to prevent and combat homelessness. I'm very proud of that work because we're seeing results right now. And I would like to take that work to the City Council. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out this evening. My name is Albert Vera. I was born and raised in Culver City, been here my entire life. I own and operate Strength Italian Market on Sepulveda Boulevard. I come from a family of service and service to the city. My father was on city council for 16 years. My mom serviced through the store and then all the organizations throughout the city. For me in particular, I believe that giving is the best way to show caring in the community, and how we can all really impact each other's lives by just being there and giving to one another on a free and willing basis. I try to give to my community in any way I possibly can. I'm on the board of directors up at Bound House, which is a rapid rehousing program for primarily families and children that go to our school district. Since July of last year, we pulled 23 different families off the streets. 14 of those families had children. We got them in permanent housing now. We have them jobs, so it's a great organization. I'd love to see that expand throughout the city. I'm on the board of directors of the YMCA as well as the Exchange Club. Member of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the Civil Service Commission, as well as I used to be on the Landlord-Tenant Mediation Board with the city. But more importantly, I'm running because I love the city. The city's giving me everything, and it's a way of me giving back to the city. So hopefully I have your vote come April 10th, but I'm really looking forward to talking to each one of you this evening and learning a little bit more about everybody, and you guys learning more about me. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question that we have, which we'll start off with Marcus Tiggs, will be what restrictions, if any, would you want to see on short-term rentals like Airbnb? And this will be a minute and a half.
Thank you. First of all, on the short-term rentals, we've been talking about this and studying this for quite a long period of time, and I think at some point we need to make some decisions. Short-term rentals, number one, I believe the restriction that needs to be in place is the property owner needs to live on the property. Anytime you have an absentee property owner, essentially you're operating kind of like a quasi-motel in a residential community, and that can create problems within the community. Number two, short-term rentals is is an economic or vehicle for some seniors and some individuals to essentially afford to remain living in our city. So I think it's a good thing to have, but we have to regulate it. So in regulation, it would be essentially forcing, if you will, the property owner to live on the premises, and then coming up with regulations, making a decision, and moving it along. Because what we have right now is, it's going on. It's going on throughout our city. We're not getting any TOT tax revenue, and it's essentially, it's unregulated, so we definitely need to regulate it.
I think the most important thing is that while we sort this out, we start collecting TOT income. This is happening in our city. The TOT, which is basically a room tax. If you rent a hotel room, you pay TOT of 14%, I believe. It's a good source of revenue for our city. We know that this is happening in our city. While we all discuss the very difficult balancing act of all the competing interests with short-term rentals, we need to collect revenue now. And ultimately, we need to assess a tax on whatever form of short-term rentals we allow. I think that it is important to make sure that the property owner, a human property owner, live on site at any short-term rental place, at least for part of the year. And I would think it's important that there not be ultimately a corporate owner of the property. And we cannot have a de facto hotel in our city. This really needs to be people supplementing their income or simply holding on to their home as they age in place. We may need to consider, I think we all are going to articulate that we have an open mind, because this is, as long as it's been going on, there have only been a couple of joint task force meetings. Last one was in July. I think, I'm running in part to peel off some Band-Aids and solve some problems that we've been reluctant to deal with. And I think it is time to quickly deal with the short-term rental issue.
I do agree that we need to have the property owner on site. I think it's essential, and it's paramount for me. In terms of regulation, we really need to create a mechanism where we can enforce these regulations, these rules, in some way we can track them. But also start bringing that money into the city. We need the revenue desperately, but we really have to make sure that, one, we have the enforcement to track it, we have the mechanism, and we have policy in place that we can move forward on it. But I think we definitely need to move forward on it and start reaping the benefits of some of the money we can get from it.
Original idea is probably the right one. Let me fix it in a minute. Daniel?
Okay, so when it comes to short-term rentals, I think in terms of regulations, part of the way that the city has moved forward already, I partially agree with. I think there should be some restriction in terms of the term in which a particular domicile can be rented in terms of short-term rentals. Right now, I think the things that are in process are either a 90-day limitation or a 180-day limitation. I think these are reasonable, partially because of my concerns around affordable housing. I feel like if we allowed short-term rentals for a full 365 days a year, that would have a direct impact both on housing prices and more specifically on rental housing prices. So if we could put some restriction on the amount of time that individuals could rent out their domiciles in terms of short-term rentals, that would help defray some of the possible concern around inflating rental prices. And if people wanted to rent out their place for further, they could just have an occupant sign a lease. I'm also in favor of considering zoning restrictions that would restrict short-term rentals to particular places, maybe not R1 or R2, but maybe others, and I would be open to community input on that.
Okay, and I think it was pretty much answered, but just as a show of hands, because I think you guys answered it in your, in the original question, but do you believe the city should collect the hotel tax now on the short-term rentals while the task force works on the actual regulations?
Looking for a show of hands?
Yeah.
So Daniel, the question was?
Yes or no on collecting tax now while the regulatory framework is happening?
I would actually be in favor of waiting.
Okay. All right, and for the next question, this will be, let's have 2 minutes. Actually a minute and a half, sorry. What is your position on fracking?
I'm in favor of a total ban on fracking and other enhanced well stimulation techniques. This is our backyard. I know the oil field was here, but there was a time when we didn't understand the dangers of neighborhood oil well drilling. Now we do, and this is your home. Not only am I in favor of banning fracking and other enhanced oil recovery techniques, I'm in favor of the maximum setback that we can impose, a buffer zone between homes, parks, schools, and businesses. Whatever science will support, whatever legally we can impose, that's what we do. Third, we need to make sure that there are no new wells drilled without an old well being safely plugged and abandoned. We also need to look at potentially imposing a pipeline management plan in the oil field so that they start to look at all the legacy pipelines that are flowing every which way from 90 years of oil production and know where they go so that we can have better spill responses. In the midterm, we need to impose a financial assurance obligation, basically a surety bond, so that there's money in place for when they go out of business so that we're not all stuck with environmental disaster and a giant bill for cleanup. And long term, we need to begin to look now at how we can end neighborhood oil drilling entirely.
I'm in favor of all forms of limiting fracking whatsoever. But not only that, we really need to work with LA County and stress to them the importance of coming really on board with the rules and regulations that Culver City wants to implement. You know, without LA County following suit, we're unfortunately, there's very little control we have over the rest of it. We have no control over LA County portion of the oil field. So we really need to stress to them the importance of eliminating fracking 100%, as well as that no new well drilling without sealing off the wells. Make sure that they're properly sealed, there's no leakage whatsoever. But I really think we need to work hard with LA County and stress the importance of coming on board with the strictest rules and regulations possible.
Daniel, the question comes to you.
So as I've said many times before, I am not in favor of fracking. I'm not in favor of well stimulation, well maintenance, gravel packing, acidation with hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid, or whatever euphemisms that oil companies use. Also, instead of just limiting net oil, new oil wells, we should limit any new oil wells until we are assured that the regulations that we pass and that the new city council will have the authority and the responsibility to pass are actually obeyed. Because for a very long time, this portion of the oil field, and in fact the entire oil field, has been regulated by DOGGR, a state regulatory agency that is firmly within the hands of industry. Until we can be sure that our locally passed regulations are adhered to, we should not approve any new oil fields, even if old ones are sealed off.
I'm adamantly against fracking. This is a public safety issue. It's a huge public safety issue. The role of an elected is to make sure all of you are safe and you can enjoy your property. The beauty of the EIR process that we have, and the comment period is expired, is we can make the regulations as tough as we want to make them. But at the end of the day, it's your safety that is paramount. In looking at this issue, there's not a whole bunch of talk of, well, if there is a release of benzene, methane, or some sort of spill, what do we do? What do you do? Where do you go? That's important. Though we know the fire department knows what to do, but we have to communicate with you, the residents, if something like that occurs. I'm thinking about CERT, fire, police, residents, exercise. Exercise. But with the EIR, this is a process for us to say, we don't want fracking, we don't want any new wells, and we want to make sure our residents are safe. We have 10% of it. So keep in mind, if something happens in LA County, it doesn't follow boundaries. So we have to collaborate with LA County to make sure that they look at what we're doing so we are safe.
Okay, as a follow-up question, so it'll be the same, starting off with Alex, is do you support the proposal to close the Inglewood oil field, and what would you do with that property?
Personally, I'm not optimistic about the ability to close the oil field down in the immediate future. There's people have property rights, both the subsurface rights and the surface rights, mineral rights and the real property on the surface. So we have to, ultimately, any strategy to end neighborhood oil drilling is going to involve those rights, whether we can sunset oil leases or permits to drill, or whether it's bringing the state on board to acquire that property, which may be viable. I've been involved in conversations with Holly Mitchell's office about that, and I can't boast that I've made any progress, but that would be a great solution. The means by which we end neighborhood oil drilling may dictate what the final use is. For example, if the state loans us $1 billion or provides $1 billion to do this would be pretty well in the state's control. My personal preference would be that and I think we need to talk about this in the general plan context. Over the next 2 years, the city will be updating the general plan. It's a blueprint, a constitution for what the city's future is, how we want to live in the future. Absolutely, a major part of that discussion has to be the oil field.
So just so I get the question, you just want to know if we support the closing of the oil field?
And what would you propose for?
All right, so in a perfect world, I think we all would want the oil field to just go away, but unfortunately, it's not going to right away. If it could, yeah, absolutely, I would support the closing of the oil field. I'd love to see up there either solar, unfortunately, this oil is contaminated. Park would be great over there, but in terms of money to clean it up and to move forward, but either a solar farm or a wind farm, something where we can do renewable energy and it can benefit the entire community rather than cause harm as the oil and fracking is doing.
Daniel, the question comes to you.
Yes, as I've been saying for many years, we need to completely close down the Inglewood oil field and turn it into a wind or solar farm. That's what I said in 2016, and that's what I've been saying in 2018. In addition to that, I think the issue of whether or not and how we close it is both a political question and it's a financial question. It's a political question in terms of whether or not our residents, stakeholders, and our politicians demand that it be closed, and it's a financial question whether or not we can get the numbers together to make the argument that oil in the long term is a bad investment. And most of the financial records and economists agree at the current moment that solar is the cheapest unsubsidized energy source currently available. That translates to the companies in the terms that it is something that people would like to buy the most. In terms of their long-term financial viability, they should be interested in turning this area, which is elevated above a lot of buildings and towers, into a solar farm, because in terms of the cost-benefit analysis with oil extraction and solar extraction, it will cost them less money and they would see a larger return. So yes, let's shut it down.
I'd like to snap my fingers and say it's closed tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's not realistic, at least at this point. As far as what I would like to see those 10 acres used as, we clean it up really well, we monitor it, and we create a park. Not just a park that has recreational facilities for our young people, multi-purpose rooms. We have more and more youth in our city than we've had in a while, and they need places to go. We live in a great city, but sometimes I think we lose sight that, our youth, we need to start building some facilities if we have an opportunity. And this would be an opportunity to do that.
So the next question is, what should be the role of development for Culver City in the next 5 years? And this will be a minute and a half.
I think, it's my turn, right? Yes. Okay. So development going forward, we have all kinds of development going on in the city, and it's great. It's great for the city, the community, and the economic base, but we need to really be smart about development. We need to continue cautiously in where we put development, where we don't put development, as well as housing, you know, where housing goes, where density goes. Through the general plan and creating, like I said, the blueprint of the entire city, we can take a look at that and look at development. I think as a city, we can't just rubber stamp a project just to bring in revenue to the city. We need to really look about the benefits that this development is going to bring into the city and the harm and the potential, you know, traffic and overall impact of the city. You can't just put development in simply to have development and create the revenue for the city. So moving forward, I think we need to be cautious, we need to be wise, and we need to really look at the big picture of what's going on in the city, as well as the surrounding city. What kind of development is going on that's going to impact Culver City? Thank you.
Another question to you.
Yes, as I've said many other forums, I think we should have a development timeline that takes into account what's happening outside of Culver City, both in Playa Vista and in Los Angeles, specifically on La Cienega Boulevard. But then also, we should do a general development audit, which would take into account what we expected to receive from the development, both as a community benefit, what we thought the traffic impacts would be, both negatively, and whether or not a specific development actually encouraged more people to not drive, to use their car, and instead use public transportation or walk or bike. And if the results don't comport with what we've actually predicted, then we need to adjust our development policies accordingly so that any new developments that we approve will actually achieve the goals that we set forth.
The development needs to be smart development. And I know it's a buzzword, as a former planning commissioner, what I mean by smart development is we need to engage the communities that are impacted. We need to empower the communities that are impacted, for the communities to speak up, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. Because I live in one area, but I might not know what's going on exactly in Blair Hill, so I need to hear from you. So then, collaboratively, city staff, the community, the developer, putting their heads together and coming up with a project that hopefully makes sense for everyone. We do need to hold the developers accountable for the impacts. And what I mean by that is, let's just say traffic. A common mitigation measure is extending the turn pocket or restriping. That's not enough. That's not enough. When we see a project after it's completed and you're wondering, where's all this new traffic? And guess what? It's probably from that project. We need to hold the developers accountable, and as far as the communities need to be empowered. And I think that's a role of the city, to empower the communities. Make it easier for you to get together. Remind you to come to the meetings because we need to hear from you.
Resident input is absolutely essential, and the city's going in the right direction on this, and we need to continue it and deepen it. We need to rethink the way that we do community meetings, because not everyone has the most extreme position on every project. And when you go to a community forum, the way that we traditionally do them, the most extreme position tends to come out. So we need to find a way to get a better representation of what the community really thinks, instead of simply the loudest voices. It takes more work from council, it takes a lot more work from staff, which is an area that could be improved, absolutely. And so I know that the residents are ready to engage. I think that we need to immediately enact an inclusionary zoning ordinance. We cannot continue to build $300 million projects without providing below market housing. It's unconscionable that people who live in below market housing are much less likely to drive. So don't have the same parking requirements. There you just save $65,000 and provide those units for them, for school teachers, for sanitation workers in our city. We need to focus a lot more on incrementalism. We have a city right now, an environment where you can build a $300 million project with a 5-acre hole in the ground, or you can add on to your house with a bedroom. You can't do anything in between. We need to make small investments in areas where we can have incremental growth, small bets instead of huge bets.
All right. The American Pediatric Association has issued guidelines to encourage primary care providers to assess for depression in adolescents on a regular basis. Would you be willing to find support for mental health professionals to do this assessment in our schools? If so, how? If not, why not?
Question to Daniel.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question? I had a little delay.
Would you be willing to find support for mental health professionals to do this assessment in our schools? If so, how? If not, why not?
Well, as a graduate of the UCLA MSW program and a firm believer in complete health, both physical and mental, I would definitely be in favor of this type of assessment, but I think it would be important to make sure that there is at least some degree of parental consent to make sure parental consent and cultural competency, because there are a lot of gray areas when it comes to mental health and when it comes to culture. I think it's very important that our students are not having to deal with depression, but both depression and anxiety without support. It completely encumbers their ability to learn and their ability to develop social skills that will support them throughout their lives. So the more support that we can provide in our schools, the better outcomes that our students have in terms of applying to colleges, going into colleges, if they choose not to go into college, finding a good job and having a stable family life. So we should do as much as we can, but we should involve the parents as much as possible in that process.
I would be, of course, I'm in favor of that. But what really the question is, if we have this resource available, are all those at-risk kids going to use it? Probably not. So part of this would be educational campaign to let the parents know what is available, to remove the stigma for a young girl or a young boy seeking mental health session or therapy, if you will. But it boils down to education. So if we have the resource there, it doesn't do any good if only a small percentage of the students are using it. We need to have the resource, but educate the parents, let them know it's available so the kids can use it. As far as funding, it could be public-private partnerships. There are organizations that do this that probably would love to be involved with our city and helping us. So we need to look at those things and then determine what is the best course of action for us to execute this. If the funding is going to come from the city in collaboration with the school district, then we need to prioritize how we're using our money. And I use prioritize a lot because we get a boatload of money, but sometimes we have to decide what is more important than the next thing. Everything cannot be a priority. This is clearly a priority in my mind that is worthy of exploring.
I have to confess I'm not knowledgeable on this issue, and I'm a big proponent of fact-based government. We have to make policy based on evidence, and all debate has to flow from a common understanding of facts. So, the first step I would need to do is learn a lot more. From what I do know and from what I've just heard, it sounds like a brilliant idea. In my bad old days of being a private practice attorney, I got my civic service fixed by doing pro bono work for D.D. Hirsch. I helped them acquire a mental health facility in Glendale, provided about $135,000, $150,000 worth of pro bono services where they managed to transfer a mental health facility serving a very vulnerable community there without interruption despite a bankruptcy. And I'm very proud of that. I received accommodation from Los Angeles County. So this is an issue that's near and dear to me. And I do think it's a great idea. In terms of whether students use it and how to fund it, I'd need to learn more, but we could look at D.D. Hirsch, which is right on the border of Culver City, and I have a relationship with the CEO, as you might expect, having done a lot of free work. And we can also look at other small school districts that might have a similar need. And as with many of the things that I talk about, this is an opportunity for Culver City to lead and provide new service.
I would definitely be in favor of it, but doing more so than just interacting with the student, I think it's really essential to really reach out to the parents and maybe create a counseling session for the parents and the child. I think if we really reach out and do this, and you hit the families, hit the children, how many problems could be really alleviated in school? How many less shootings could we have? I mean, we just had another one today, this morning. This epidemic is getting out of hand. So I think this would be a good way to really start. I mean, we can do private-public venture. We can reach out and see if there's any grant money, or if the school has money. But to move forward with it, I definitely think it would be an interesting and a great idea to go forward with.
Okay. As we see housing become more expensive, we see diversity diminishing. What would you do to make sure that people who work here in Culver City can also live here, whether buying or renting?
Let me make sure I understand the question. We're talking about diversity in housing itself, of the people who live in housing, diversity race, diversity.
I believe
it's
that if housing's more expensive, then I'm assuming that it's diversity people, diversity incomes, diversity in general.
All right. I'll try to respond to the question as far as the creation of more workforce housing units within our city. Or we can call it affordable housing. The general plan update is going to be the mechanism for us to look at density. And sometimes increased density can be a bad word depending upon what area it is in. We have programs for low income, Section 8, but what we really don't have are programs for the lower middle class. And that's where a lot of this workforce housing folks are going to be in that category. How about a voucher program? Basically, kind of like Section 8, but less regulations. And with the voucher program, essentially a landlord can voluntarily participate. Part of the rent is subsidized with this voucher. So you ask, where is the money coming from? The money can come from a couple of sources, but let's just talk about one source. In our community, for whatever reason, and I think it's a good reason, we like to tax ourselves, especially parcel taxes. I'm not saying let's have a parcel tax to start funding this type of program, but I am saying let's look at it and have the honest conversation. Do we really want to do something to solve the problem?
I've thought about housing a lot, not just in my role as the chair of the Committee on Homelessness, but just because I'm a bit of a planning nerd. But housing is the big issue in coastal California. It's not just homelessness. We get six-figure families coming into the housing office saying, "How can I get some help?" I mean, you've got a housing problem when that happens. I referred to inclusionary zoning earlier. That's just part of a package that the housing office just put forward as their work plan last week before City Council. It's one of the biggest set of programs I've ever seen put before City Council. I'm proud to have worked on many of the things that were proposed. What I'm not excited about is that with all that work, we're talking about 70 or 80 units of homes, below market homes that we'll be able to provide. Pulling a string here, a string there, requiring the next developer to provide a few units, and so on and so forth. So it's going to take more work than that. Absolutely, we need to do that. Every tool we need to deploy it to provide below market housing and more accessible housing. But the general planning process will be a chance to really look at that deep. there's a temptation in planning to say, we want the city to be this number of people, or we need this area to be this zone. That's the wrong way to think about it. The general plan, we need to really have community involvement and talk about what is the city we want to live in? What are the values that we hold dear?
I believe part of your question was how do we create a work and livable environment? How do people work and live in the city as well? In the past, well, recently actually, I've been really chastised a lot for being involved and being associated with the Chamber of Commerce, which to me, I don't understand. This, I think, is a great opportunity for the Chamber to be involved. And talking with Colin Diaz, who's the president, we want to come up with a program where we can reach out to the residents of Culver City, first and foremost, when jobs do open up, whether through Apple or Amazon or even through Serrano Market. When jobs come up, we can contact the Chamber. They reach out to our locals first, to our residents, people in the city who are looking for jobs. We can give them first dibs at jobs in the city. What better way to really create a workable, livable environment than that? So that I mean primarily, but we need housing. Housing it's essential. Maybe we can give developers incentive to build more housing. We can give breaks to police, fire, our school teachers, anything really to create an environment where our locals, our teachers, our public servants can live and work in Culver City. So that's how I'd love to move forward with it.
Daniel, the question comes to you.
Yes, if we don't do anything about housing to address the premise of the question, then we will significantly be losing our diversity in a couple ways. We will be losing a number of our seniors who won't be allowed to age in place. We will be losing a number of our young people who won't be allowed to live close to home. We will be losing people of color who won't be able to afford to live in Culver City. There are a lot of affluent people of color who live in Culver City, many in Blair Hills, but our diversity would be significantly impacted. In order to forestall that, we should have policies that include affordable housing, primarily through inclusionary zoning, which is more of a long-term affordable housing policy that would incentivize developers over a length of a generation to build affordable housing. But we should also directly address workforce housing. In that vein, I think we should adopt the policy of some other cities to have public-private partnership through private nonprofits, not for-profit businesses that find areas that would be worthy of developing for affordable workforce housing, and then have the city provide some funding to make that a possibility or a reality.
Okay. Please describe 3 specific plans or policies you propose to keep Culver City accessible, safe, and livable for older adults specifically.
Is this me? I think the oil field is something that affects everybody regardless of age, and I've been very specific in what my plan is there, so there's one. 2, I think we really need to take a good look at our bus system. I think it does a great job, but we need to, there have been major changes in the opportunities to get around in the region. We've got the public has invested $2.5 billion in giving Culver City the best transit access on the west side. So we need to think about how to orient our buses towards that, so that as we age, we have that opportunity. Some of us will lose our, they'll probably take away my license young. And we need to have, our seniors need the opportunity to use a robust transit system. That means we need to continue our investment in the GPS tracking system so that people know when the bus is going to show up, so you're not standing there for 45 minutes. We need shorter headways on high frequency routes. We need to orient the service towards the rail, and we need to look at ways for people to use things other than bicycles to be safe on our streets, whether it's electric wheelchairs or scooters or something that liberates and enhances the mobility options for seniors. 3, I think in general we should continue to invest in the senior center services, which are wonderful. It's an amazing service that we provide. We should look at what services can be brought out of the senior center and into the neighborhoods and even out into the outside of the community.
I think for me, it's the three, in terms of seniors would be aging in place. How can we really support our aging community and make and ensure that they stay in the houses that they've been in their entire lives? Whether it's through grant money or through money from the state, something where we can really ensure that they can truly age in place. Another one is transportation. Not a whole lot of seniors I know, well, actually, let me think that they do, but the bicycle's not an easy way for them to get around. So we really need to figure out something. Maybe we can get a smaller shuttle like a Dash or something to pick up seniors and bring them to either the bus or public transportation, or even to a doctor or something, something where we can really reach out to our aging community and provide the best service we possibly can. In walking around this campaign season, going into houses, I've noticed so many different houses that are in disrepair. Because they're elderly, they can't, whether they're now widowed, but the houses are really falling apart. And I was talking to this one lady once, and she had me actually fix her screen door because the latch came off and it stayed open all the time. So I just hooked it back up, but there's organizations, people who go around, and I've been talking to a couple of them already, where we can hire them, and they can go around and fix senior housing, just do little pick-up jobs, just things that really make the seniors feel a whole lot more comfortable in the house that they can no longer take care of. So those are my top three.
Daniel, the question comes to you.
So yeah, I think the first and probably the most important is accessibility, to include mass transit, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and just general support, like the shuttles that we already have in the city that provide transportation for both seniors and people who have mobility issues, but also exploring the possibility of further shuttles that can get the seniors to some of the newer places in the city where they might not have explored. But a very necessary component of this, if we're going to address senior issues, is housing. Walking door to door in 2016 and 2018, I've experienced very many stories from seniors who've been priced out of the place where they've lived for the last 20 or 30 years. And I think one of the most effective ways that we can do right by seniors is to allow them to continue to live in the communities where they are connected to. Lastly, I think we need to do a bit more, not just for seniors, but for seniors as well, beyond the senior center, to make sure that our parks are accessible and that they have services that seniors would like to partake of beyond the senior center in Betts Park.
What I would first do is set up have a round table or a task force, if you will. The center of gravity would be the senior center. That is a very active building with a lot of things going on. I would talk to the seniors, get their input. Let's find out what is missing. Because I can guess it could be transportation for some, but some it's not. Others it could be, I need to fix my house and I can't fix it, I just need a handyman. I don't know. Others it could be, I'm not getting regular meals. So let's first figure out what the problem is. If it is transportation, I don't know how many of these dial rides we have, but I know it's not more than 5. I only see the same one driving around the city. Maybe we need a few more. Maybe we need to reevaluate the routes. But we shouldn't just guess on stuff. We need to talk to the seniors and tell us, this is the problem. The round table would also include police and fire, but especially fire, because fire usually is the ones getting a call for a medical emergency. Find out from fire, what are the added challenges? How can we make things easier for you and easier for our seniors? Transportation, I've already discussed. I believe that's an issue. I think maybe extending the lines out a little bit further once we figure out where the seniors really want to go.
Okay. What is your opinion on the proposed 700 unit building on Green Valley Circle by Marshalls, also mixing with mixed use? And what should the proportion for low-income housing for tenants be? And more importantly, how do you propose to mitigate traffic?
Well, that that problem has sort of been put to rest for a while. The developer sort of pulled off the table and is now revamping their thoughts and what they want to put in there. From the beginning, though, I was totally against it. That size project does not fit in that area. Infrastructure-wise, traffic-wise, our police and fire services, the demand that they'll have on our power grid, a multitude of reasons that project to me did not fit in that area. In terms of what's the ratio of affordable housing to, that's something that I don't know that we can come up with one set number. I know we definitely need affordable housing. The more the merrier. The developer really needs to work with the city, and we need to come up with a number that it would help the city. But like I said, that project is off the table. We need to really go back. We need to get the community involved, which has been really involved in terms of what the community wants in that area, what will benefit the community. A grocery store, a drugstore, things that we really want to make a walkable, livable community. We need to put projects in place that really support that. This project didn't support that. Let's put in a grocery store, let's put in a drugstore where that community can walk to it and benefit from it. You know, this project would force people in their cars to drive other places and that sort of defeats the purpose of what Culver City is moving forward to. So, yeah, that's it.
Daniel, the question to you.
So as I said at the Fox Hills forum, I think the pathway forward for this development should be highly influenced by the community. And the community, at the one unofficial meeting I went to and the one official meeting I went to, was very pointed and very direct and very unified in the fact that the number of units was entirely too much, that they wanted to preserve retail space, specifically grocery and drugstores, and that if they did have housing, the proportion that would be all right with it, they wanted to have some of it at least be affordable housing. My personal opinion is that if we build any affordable housing in Culver City in a large scale development, and we're serious about doing anything about affordable housing, if we're actually serious, then we should go into the negotiating table asking for 25% of the units to be affordable housing. That might not be the final number that comes out in the negotiations, but if you want to make a significant impact, then you have to ask for a significant chunk. And I think there is a way for the developers to still get a financial benefit with that type of allocation.
That project, in my view, is incompatible for that area. That's zoned commercial neighborhood serving. What commercial neighborhood serving means is it could be a grocery store, it could be a pharmacy, it could be cleaners, it could be things of that nature. For the residents of Fox Hills, if that's developed into 700 plus apartment units with some mixed use, they're gonna lose that component, that neighborhood serving component. As far as mitigating traffic, keep in mind, Fox Hills 2 years ago plus, they've been complaining about people speeding down Green Valley. They've been talking about parking. They've been talking about all kinds of issues. And now there was a project where those issues weren't even resolved. On projects, again, we need to hold the developer accountable. When you talk about mitigating traffic, I've been saying, and I'll keep saying until I see one, have a traffic control officer at some intersections. During peak hours, use some high-tech stuff. Whether it's Uber movements or whether it's the high-tech street signals, we need to do things like that because what's happening is the developer, they get a project approved, the traffic engineer says everything's fine and it's not fine. We need to hold people accountable.
It's not my place to dictate to the property owner or to the residents of Fox Hills or any other part of Culver City what should go at Fox Hills Plaza. And what I refuse to discuss with some people in the community, and it cost me votes, was the idea of zero housing there. We are in a housing crisis, and I lost votes because I refused to say that I will never allow, that if I were on the city council, would never approve a project that included homes for people because we need homes for people, because we have a whole lot more jobs in this city than we have homes, and that's why we have traffic. So I'm against I've come out publicly against every iteration of the Fox Hills project that's been provided so far, because I felt that the developer came into the community with an almost colonial attitude that don't worry, Fox Hills, these are millennials, and therefore all the problems will be solved. And you know, Fox Hills is not primarily millennials, so even if people believe that this is the magic formula for traffic-free development, it sounded like the developer was coming in roughshod to bowl over the community. So that's my problem with development. It's not my place to say what they should build there. That's not my job. It is a zoning change that they've requested, and my understanding of what that's zoned for is actually includes auto repair and hotels. So what I've told people in Fox Hills is be smart. Smart development, the flip side of it is smart advocacy. So think about what you want and advocate from that position. It's going to be better than a hotel or an auto repair shop.
Okay, you've been elected, it's budget time. You must cut 2% from the budget. List one thing that you would not touch and 3 things that would be subject to cuts.
Daniel, I believe that goes to you first.
Okay, so it's a very difficult question to answer on the spot, so I'll just start with 3 things that I would cut. I do have some issues with the current state of our budget being 50% police and fire. I'm very concerned about the health and safety of the city. But as evidenced by the city's
It's gonna let us all hang.
I think you have.
No, it's not on that end. It's the internet connection. So Daniel, if you can hear us, you've just dropped off.
We can do a total count.
that don't exist currently in Culver City. So that would be first on the chopping block for me. Also, look very closely at this.
I don't even know if you can see me. Yeah, sorry, we just dropped the signal. I will try and get it back. Perhaps we should move on to Marcus. Please do.
I have trouble cutting fire or police. While public safety does engulf a good, almost pretty close to 50% of the general fund, but we live in the city and we love our city because we feel safe. Everything else flows from that. If we didn't feel safe, it didn't matter how many nice parks we have. It doesn't matter how many nice neighbors we have. So that is not an area I would be looking to, in a wholesale manner, cut. Areas that I would cut, I would talk to, or have the city manager speak to the department heads and say, give us some ideas so we can discuss that if you cut a certain percentage, how that's going to impact the level of service. We know it's going to impact it in some ways, but we want to make sure that the impact really doesn't, we as residents, we don't see it. Right now, our city employees are shorthanded. They're really shorthanded to do the quality of service that we expect. So I'm not going to cut police and fire. That's just me. I think public safety is core, and I would talk to the department heads to see what areas they could reduce.
What would you cut? Because I think the question was, what would you cut?
Pick a department.
list 3 things that would be subject to being
Well,
cut.
well, I don't, and I'll answer it this way. I don't know what area I could cut from, because I would want to talk to the department heads. There might be some departments that a cut is not going to impact you as a resident, while there might be other departments where a cut would do the opposite. So I can't answer that on the fly as far as what I would cut.
Very challenging question. I've read, in my private practice days, I represented municipalities as creditors sometimes. I also represented a municipality in Chapter 9, which is the provision of the bankruptcy code that you go through if you're a municipality that needs protection of the bankruptcy code. It's not a fun process. It's not good. Lawyers do well. Traditionally, I've read an entire book on this when the Finance Advisory Committee was first formed. I was curious about it, and I read a series of white papers about how to deal with the municipal budget crunch that happened in 2009 through 2000. Really today, we're still emerging from it. We're now sort of healthy, still dealing with deferred maintenance that accrued during that time. So there are no easy answers. Is my conclusion from reading that book. What a lot of cities do is impose across-the-board cuts. I think this hypothetical was 2%. That's pretty easy to impose on every department. Say 2% until we can all get together and figure out how we're going to deal with this. Where triage. I think the fire and police are 55% actually, and it climbs of the general fund. That climbs every year because of the nature of our pension obligations and where those arise. It's police and fire. We have to. I agree that the police and fire are the core of our charter city status, of our independence, but we need to look at overtime, whether there are certain programs that can be deployed more effectively to reduce that overtime. We need to look at every department and see certain things that seem appealing, like eliminating park staff, may have down the road a lot more costs, where you've got kids who are not growing up with activities keeping them busy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Way over time.
Yes.
Sorry.
So, me personally, I wouldn't touch police and fire. To me, that's really what makes Culver City, the response time, our fire department, our police department. It's a fine line to cut. Really, where do you cut? In a perfect world, nowhere. But I think we should have it really bring all the department heads together and see maybe even we can cut 0.5% from each department. For one thing, our maintenance department, our street and sidewalk department, it seems our streets are always in disrepair, and the sidewalks doesn't seem like they get repaired anyway. Let's take some of that money and I don't know really where there's one set answer. Everything is, our city is so dependent on every one project that's out there. So to say I'd cut 2% from parks or street maintenance or wherever, it's a difficult call. I think it's more of getting all the departments together and think what we can do collectively, talking to staff and what can come together collectively to work, but definitely not cut police and fire.
We did get Daniel back. We want to give him a minute, maybe cut him out at 20 seconds. So Daniel, it's to you for 1 minute. Don't make a liar out of me. No? Daniel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So, despite what my fellow candidates just said, I would still say I would be very much in favor of doing an audit of the police and fire budget to see where we could reduce. Because while I do appreciate the safety that we have in Culver City, I also recognize that we are serviced by the Los Angeles County Sheriff and the California Highway Patrol, and that we are a small city, and that to some degree over-policing can be as much of an issue as under-policing. And the other aspect I think I would also consider looking at our communications budget and seeing how we can improve communications overall, but if we can see ways to do them more efficiently by using newer technological tools and social media. Okay, I see a hand. I'm going to stop.
Okay, we are going to wrap it up very soon. The last bit is more of just how you answer on the fly. No reasoning, no explanations, just give an answer, and it will just keep circling through,
So like 5 seconds?
pretty much, or less.
That's hard.
Or less.
So this is
or
the
less.
lightning round?
Yes. So we're gonna make it really easy starting off. Your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue.
Daniel?
Blue.
Okay,
That's
Marcus?
true.
All right. Favorite Saturday morning cartoon?
Tom and Jerry.
Daniel?
The Smurfs.
SpongeBob.
Ren and Stimpy.
All right. Band, group, or artist, if stuck on a desert island, that's all you can listen to.
Daniel, band, group, or artist on desert island? All you can listen to.
Prince.
Celia Cruz.
Zeppelin.
George Strait.
All right. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Daniel?
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Least favorite vegetable as a kid?
Is that me? Okra.
Yes, okra.
Daniel?
Brussels sprouts.
Broccoli.
All right. Favorite classic film?
Oh, is that me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Gone with the Wind.
Daniel?
Dr. Strangelove.
King Kong.
The Christmas one. It's a Wonderful Life.
All right. Cat, dog, or fish?
That's to you, Daniel. Cat, dog, or fish?
Dog.
Big dog.
Dog.
U.S. state you have not visited but is on your bucket list? Marcus.
Kentucky.
Alaska.
Texas.
U.S. state, Daniel, you haven't visited but would like to.
I've actually never been to Hawaii.
All right. Favorite animated character?
Bart Simpson.
Gumby.
Daniel?
Mine's actually Philip J. Fry from the Simpsons spinoff Futurama.
Flintstones.
All right. Favorite book?
Of Mice and Men.
Favorite book, Daniel?
Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison.
Commander's Assessment by General Stanley McChrystal.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
All right. So now we will have closing statements and a minute and a half. And I believe we'll start this way and go that way.
Great. You're
But-
last, Daniel.
I just want to thank everybody once again. I hope through this conversation you learned a little more about me, and I learned a little bit more about the community up here. It's a crucial time. It's a crucial time in the city, and I look forward to being elected to really serve each and every one of you. For me, it's not about me. It's not about what I can bring to council, but what we collectively can bring to the city council. So I'm looking forward, and I'm eager to work with each and every one of you moving forward. Thank you all very much.
I was very privileged to be able to buy a home in Culver City at the age of 29. And I had a lot of choices at that time about where in the Los Angeles basin I could live. And I chose Culver City because I saw what it was then, centrally located, great weather, great population, independent city with a real civic life, and a real opportunity to be heard and to be involved. But I also saw what it could be. And over the last 13 years, I've watched it head towards what it could be, and it's now time to realize what all the potential that's already built in there. That brings up some challenges. We didn't talk about traffic, but we did talk about development. There are challenges out there, and there are difficult questions. But I love difficult questions and difficult challenges. I want to tackle them in a way that increases our public wealth, increases the common good, and makes this the kind of city I want to retire in and not just raise kids in. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for inviting us here. our community, as candidates, we've gone through a whole bunch of forums. But what I do want to say, the people that are videoing on Facebook Live, Ken and his team, it's great. What other community has someone volunteering to do that for the residents to see what's going on? That's part of the fabric of our community. We don't have to agree on everything, but what's good about us, I like to say, is we try to respect other people's ideas even if they differ from ours. And that, for people who know me, that's who I am. Because I don't have all the answers to all the issues. But I think what you want to know in electing somebody for city council, not so much how they're going to rule on each issue, because I bet you at some point there's going to be an issue you don't agree with. But what you want to look at is the philosophy. My philosophy is listening to both sides of an argument, researching the issue, and then trying my best to make the best decisions possible for our great community. It's about us, regardless of what happens in this election for me. I love our city, I love our residents, I love you folks for coming out. Culver City is great.
Daniel, 90 seconds closing statement to you.
Once again, thanks for having me tonight. I'm sorry that you can't actually see me, but I hope any concerns that you've had or any questions you've had about me have been addressed. If they have not, I would invite you to email my campaign or give me a call and we can have a conversation before the election. I'm privileged to be endorsed by the Culver City Employees Association, the Culver City Democratic Club, Culver City Coalition, and other Culver City leaders and elected officials and former elected officials. I think if you were to ask any of them why they chose to support me, Daniel Lee, a newbie who's only lived here for 15 years, I think they would say that they actually really believe that I mean what I say. And they agree with what I say. They agree what I say around equity, around inclusion, around wanting to be a representative for the entire city, not a particular enclave, not a particular agency or nonprofit. I'm not someone who condones or campaigns negatively, and I disavow all of that. I would really, truly like to represent this entire city, and I really hope you consider giving me your vote on April 10th. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to call the meeting to an end and thank all of the candidates for showing up. Thank you for coming and listening to them. No questions from the floor, but at this point in time, since the meeting is over, we have 30 minutes before we have to clear out of here. So now is your opportunity to come and ask candidates questions individually and meet the candidates, ask any specific questions that you would like of the individual candidates. We do need to be out of here before 9 o'clock. So.
You know, if you guys do this 10 more times, we'll solve it. I'm just proposing.
Yeah.
Let me say to the residents, there's an election April 3rd, and it will be here. It will be here.
Oh, yeah.